Welcome to Gurps Character Creation Part 3. So after designing attributes, secondary characteristics, and adds and disadds, you go on to quirks. Quirks are -1 points, little small quirks or mania or likings, something your character always do. It might be a superstition or a little extra detail that you can roleplay in the game. Quirks, if I can give you a pro tips, great characters are born out of their quirks, and I've saw many great characters coming out of these little -1 points disadds in a sense. For example, a quirks like don't fight women. If the big bad at the end of the story is a woman, the character, the player can find himself not wanting to fight the bad guys in the end because she's a woman, because of this little quirks he have. So try to be colorful and inventive when you're designing your quirks, and of course within a genre. I designed a PC once that he sang La Marseillaise, France's national anthem, every time he go out to take a leak. So it was very funny, but not very for a serious game. Quirks are also used as a way of balancing out the points in your character. So, for example, if you miss 2 points to complete your characters, you can take 2 small quirks at -1 to have this balance on your sheet. But you can also, most of the times, you can take undescribed quirks, and as you play you can decide what they are. Most GM will accept a maximum of 5 quirks on your sheet. More than 5 quirks, the common knowledge or the common wisdom is that more than 5 quirks you won't be playing your quirks after 5. So and don't forget you have disadds on your character sheet, so you have those to play as well sometimes. So maximum of 5 is recommended. Then you proceed to skills, and skills in GURPS is maybe the most important thing in your character design, because nearly half of the book is skills in all edition of GURPS, in fact. So and I prepare a little sheet here. So when you are buying skills in GURPS, you will find there is 4 different skills difficulty. You have easy skills, average skills, hard skills, and very hard skills. And I've placed underneath some examples. So swimming, it's an easy skill, everybody can do it. A stealth skills, everyone can do it, but it's more difficult. Hard strategy skill, like very like politics or history, are very hard on the brain, and very hard are reserved for science skills and things that most people cannot do it with no training. So your skill will of course depend, your skill ranks or level will depend on how many points you invest in each individual skills, and you have a skill for everything in GURPS. So for example, if you have swimming at 0 point, you will have what we call a default. Most of the times skills by default are you don't need to write it on your character sheet. It happens in games. Your character tries to swim against a strong current, and the GM asks you for a swimming check, and you say, I don't have the skill. So you go on a default mode. So most of easy, average, and hard skill will have a default. Oftentimes it will be an attribute -4, an attribute -5, and an attribute -6. And very hard skill don't have default by any means. You cannot do nuclear physics by default. You cannot you cannot understand biochemistry just by looking at molecules. No, it doesn't happen. So the more you will invest point in your skill, the more efficient you will be at it. And skill picking in Gurps, you have to go back to step 1 and 2. So you will have to check your design idea before investing points in your character, and you will have also talk about your GM if there is skill level maximum for this campaign. I've prepared another little sheet here. So in a generic situation, you could use this guideline here. So in skills that are not so much important for your character, or skills that you are giving for color purpose, you could place 1 point, and that will be your background skill and hobby skill. That means you are trained in it, you have spent some time in it, but you're not. It's not the core skill for your character. Then you have 2 points. You could consider that it is twice the hobby skill. So you start to become a professional in that skill. But at 4 points, you're beginning to have professional skills that you and me have, and everyday life situation where we are working on something, and we are rewarded for it, like compensated with money. And 8 points and more will be your lifelong pursuit, and there is no maximum in this. You could spend 20 points if you want. But when you hit a certain level of skills, you will have your skills at a higher number. And when you have 14 in a skill in Gurps, you're pretty much considered an expert. So you don't need to spend much or very large amount of points in a skill. There is advantage to have a skill at 20 or more to bypass penalties and difficult situation and such. But most of the time, if you want to stay realistic, a skill at 14 is like a threshold or a benchmark for somebody who is an expert. When you buy these skills, I will show you a little table here. Depending on your skill difficulty and depending on the points you buy, it will give you a skill level that is based on the attributes. And the attributes will vary based on the skill you took. So you will have physical skill and mental skill. Physical skill will be based off dex most of the time, and you will have high Q for mental skill. But sometimes you will have skills like swimming who are based off HT, because when you swim, your cardiovascular system is more important than your actual swimming technique. If you want to stay afloat, endurance is really important. So in 3rd edition, Gurps assumed that 1 point in a skill represented 200 hours of training in that skill. In 4th edition, it assumed a much broader range of explanation for points, but you could keep that as a basis or as a framework to give relevance to 1 point. What 1 point means. So there is a useful PDF that Steve Jackson Games give for free on their site. It is called the Gurps skill categories. I will give a link in the show notes. It is a very useful PDF where every skill is regrouped by team, and when you are designing, for example, a spy, every spy skill will be regrouped together, so it's more easy to don't forget skills or and such. So I prepare another little sheet here. Let's suppose I have a budget to buy skills of 20 points. I have a rogue character in mind here, so I've listed some skills and spent my 20 points in every column here. So here I've spent exactly 2 points in every skill for a total of 20 points, and that makes me a generalist. If I am a rogue and I have all these skills, I am pretty much trained in a little bit in every skills you see here. But if I spend my point more like this, with an 8 in lockpicking and a 4 in stealth and a 4 in climbing, my character suddenly is more like a cat burglar, because he's more specialized in stealthing around and opening vaults. And if I spend my points otherwise, let's say an 8 in fast talk and a 4 in carousing and acting, suddenly I'm more like the face in a group. I'm more the charismatic guy. And we can assume that these 3 characters could have the same basic attributes, but just by spending skill point differently, I gave myself already a vibe, a specialization in each skills. So this is how you model a character in Gurps. You really spend your points where it matters for your idea, for your step 2. So this is a great tip for modeling your character. Yeah, I talk about skills and skill default. So a quick reminder, if you lack points, remember that most skills can be rolled by default. Especially if you're playing like an action hero or a superhero with really high attributes, you don't have to buy a lot of skills. If I have an 18 in dexterity, I can probably do most physical action without being trained in them. I will have like a dexterity at -4 or 5 or 6 for attempting acrobatic, climbing, and such. But if I have an 18, even a dex -4 will give me a 14 in basic default skill. So you don't have to spend much points if you have large attributes. But if your character in your head has this big, very high dexterity, and on top of that he is trained in gymnastic, well, you should spend point in gymnastic too, because it's about modeling, it's about your idea in your head. And points, remember, can means hours in training. So to model what you have in mind, if you have a gymnastic, you suddenly become super dexterous. Yeah, maybe you should have 8 points in acrobatics. So the last thing about your characters is equipment. In Gurps, you have what they call a starting wealth. In a realistic game, it's a basic unit of money you receive for buying stuff. In a realistic game, you can use a percentage of that to buy adventuring material or equipment. In a more cinematic or a typical fantasy game, go ahead, just spend all your money on adventuring gear. This is how we do it in Pathfinder and Dungeons and Dragons, so yeah, why not change that? why change that? Just go ahead. But in a realistic situation, most people will not buy guns and super hot rods and all the time and not spend money on housing, on transportation, food, insurance. So if you want to be more realistic, you can maybe spend half of it, half of this starting wealth. Starting wealth will depend on your social status and your if you have a wealth advantage, and also on the time period and setting you are in. So if you play a Stone Age man, you will maybe have I don't know $1 worth of equipment. But if you're playing a modern man, a typical modern man, you will have a typical salary or wealth. Equipment list will also vary to infinity. The basic set have an extensive list of weapons and armor and basic equipment stuff like ropes and climbing kits, and there is a several page of equipment. But of course, in other Gurps book, like Gurps High Tech, Gurps Low Tech, and Gurps Ultra Tech, you will have a vast amount of equipment, like from sailing boat to ray gun. Everything is in there. Everything have sometimes a stats or price or approximation of weight, and so it's really important. Not important, but a great addition to any Gurps book. But you can model everything in reality. A lot of Gurps master sometimes have catalogs of equipment. I know one guy who used an old Sears catalog from the 20s to have as an equipment list for his player in a pulp game. So you can use reality with this game. So yeah, if you follow every steps through and through, you will have complete your character sheet. Some final notes about character creation. You should show your character sheet to your game master for approval, because sometimes when we design in our corner, maybe some points were not discussed clear enough. So sometimes we will do some mistakes, and the game master could be in for a nasty surprise if, for example, I have bought powerful FBI friends as an advantage, and maybe in this game we are chased by the FBI. So it's a good measure to make sure that your character is approved by the GM. In your character creation, also in Gurps, you will have sometimes a tool called a template. Template are basically what you have in other game called a class. In Gurps, template are not class by any means. They are more like grocery store list. If I take for example, the template spy, I want to play a spy. This template will have suggestion of what my skill should be if I want to play a typical spy. And there will be notes about option, what type of spy do I want to play. And if I take the template as is, I will be a pretty much balanced spy with various skills that we can expect from a spy. But I'm not in any way obligated to follow that template in any sense. They are not classes. They are regroupment or list of advantage, disadvantages, and skills that are mostly typically fine in a spy. So you have a small chapter in this basic set about templates, and GM will sometimes prepare templates in advance. You can have templates for race, for culture, for profession, for occupation, for everything. You can regroup. You can have a template for being a robot, or a cat, or a special op, green beret, or or a scientist from the 50s. So the GM can propose you a template to facilitate your character creation and just as a tool. So don't treat it like a class in other game. Just run through the numbers and the list and pick what you want, and then afterwards call yourself a spy or a samurai or whatever. So there you go. If you follow all these steps, you will be more comfortable to create your own character with Gurps. And don't forget, it's a collaborative experience. You cannot you cannot design a Gurps character out of the blue and expect it to fit perfectly in every game. So it very much depends on what you do with it. So thanks for watching, and see you soon for another Gurps video.